horse won't enter box. Warning horse guards, Royal Guard, Human Guard, Horse, London. Tourists were already gathering along the barriers, cameras in hand, eager to catch a glimpse of the ceremonial guards and their magnificent horses. The rhythmic clopping of hooves against the cobblestones echoed through the square as the elite riders prepared for their morning drills. Everything seemed calm, almost perfect, yet behind the scenes, a small storm was quietly brewing in the stables. Inside the stables, a new horse was making its first appearance. His name was Valor, a chestnut horse with a shiny coat that glimmered in the sunlight. Valor was large, strong, and clearly healthy, but his eyes held a hint of nervousness that was impossible to ignore. Unlike the other horses, who seemed calm and composed as they awaited their riders, Valor shifted from hoof to hoof, his ears flicking back and forth, his nostrils flaring slightly. He was not used to this environment, not used to the noise, the movement, and the rigid routines of the horse guards. The young guard assigned to Valor, a man named Thomas, approached the stall cautiously. Thomas was experienced, having trained with the horse guards for several years, but even he felt a little unsure. Training a new horse for ceremonial duties was never easy, and Valor's behavior already showed that this task would be more challenging than usual. Thomas spoke softly, his voice calm and steady as he tried to reassure the horse. "Easy, boy, you'll be fine, just follow me," he said, extending his hand with a gentle touch. Valor took a tentative step forward but then quickly pulled back, unwilling to enter the stable box fully. Other guards watched silently, their expressions polite but curious. They had seen many new horses arrive over the years, and they knew that some horses adapted quickly while others took their time. But Valor's reluctance was unusual. He wasn't frightened of humans. He had been handled gently by his previous caretakers, but he seemed unsure about the stable itself. It was as if the confined space, the unfamiliar smells, and the echo of hooves from other horses made him feel trapped. Thomas tried again, this time using a different approach. He walked calmly around Valor, allowing the horse to see him from all sides. He spoke softly, sometimes pausing to let the horse examine him, sometimes gently patting his neck. Valor's muscles remained tense, and he stepped backward several times, clearly resisting the idea of entering the box. Thomas sighed quietly, knowing he needed patience more than anything else. Forcing Valor would only make him more anxious, and for a ceremonial horse, trust was essential. The stables were busy that morning. Other horses were being groomed, their riders checking bridles and saddles, ensuring everything was perfect for the upcoming practice. Valor's box was in the center of the stable, which meant he could see and hear everything happening around him. Each passing horse, each clatter of a horseshoe, seemed to make him more alert and cautious. His eyes darted from side to side, following every movement. He raised his head high, nostrils flaring, ears twitching constantly. One of the older guards, Sergeant Harris, walked over to observe the situation. He was a tall man, known for his calm demeanor and patience with both horses and soldiers. He placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder and nodded toward Valor. "Take it slow," he said. "He's not being stubborn, he's just scared. Let him get used to it. Ceremonial horses aren't trained in a day. Give him time." Thomas nodded, grateful for the advice. He knew Harris was right. Horses could sense tension, and if he became frustrated or rushed, Valor would only become more fearful. Thomas stepped back slightly, giving Valor space while still remaining close enough to guide him. He spoke quietly, repeating the same reassuring words, hoping the horse would feel the calm energy radiating from him. As the minutes passed, a small crowd of tourists had gathered outside the stable doors. They whispered to each other, pointing at Valor, their curiosity piqued. The chestnut horse was unusually expressive, and his hesitation made him stand out from the other horses, who were quietly standing in their boxes. Thomas noticed the attention but ignored it, His focus was solely on Valor. Every small movement, every flick of the ears or swish of the tail mattered. Finally, Thomas tried a different tactic. He took a piece of soft cloth from his pocket and rubbed it gently along Valor's nose. The horse sniffed cautiously, his ears flicking forward in curiosity. Thomas allowed him to explore the cloth, letting Valor touch and nuzzle it. Slowly, he began to take small steps forward, testing the space of the box. Each step was careful, deliberate, as if the horse was weighing every decision. Thomas remained calm, speaking softly, encouraging him without forcing him. Other guards continued their work around them, occasionally glancing toward the new recruit. They whispered among themselves, offering quiet words of support or advice. Some suggested treats, others recommended a familiar object from Valor's previous home. Thomas considered each option, but knew that building trust was more important than quick results. A ceremonial horse needed to be calm under pressure, and forcing Valor would risk undoing all of that potential. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting longer shadows across the parade ground. Outside, the tourists' excitement grew as they waited for the famous ceremonial drills. Inside the stable, however, time seemed to move differently. Every second counted, yet patience was essential. Thomas could feel his heart rate quicken slightly, aware of the clock ticking down to the practice session. But he kept his focus on the horse, reminding himself that pushing too hard would only make things worse. Gradually, Valor began to relax, his movements becoming less sharp and more fluid. He took a few more steps into the box, then paused, ears flicking to the side as if listening for reassurance. Thomas smiled quietly, gently patting the horse's neck. "Good boy," he whispered. "You're doing well." The other guards nodded subtly, impressed by Thomas's patience and Valor's gradual progress. It was clear that the day ahead would be challenging, but also full of promise. Valor had arrived at a place steeped in history, where each horse played a vital role in the ceremonial life of London. The Horse Guards Parade was not just a tourist attraction. It was a symbol of discipline, tradition, and pride. And today, a new chapter was beginning for both the young horse and the guard assigned to him. As the morning progressed, Thomas continued to work with Valor, guiding him gently into the box and then letting him step back out again. Each repetition built confidence, and slowly, the horse began to understand that the stable was a safe place, that the guards were there to guide and protect him, not to harm or rush him. It was a delicate dance of patience, trust, and understanding, a lesson that would shape the relationship between horse and rider in the days to come. By the time the other horses were ready for their practice, Valor had taken several steps fully into the box without resistance. It was a small victory, but an important one. Thomas knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, and that the ceremonial parade would test Valor's courage and training in ways he had never experienced before. But for now, the horse had taken his first step toward becoming a trusted member of the King's Guard, and that was a moment worth celebrating quietly, in the calm of the stable, away from the eyes of the tourists. The next day dawned bright and cool over the Horse Guards Parade in London. A gentle breeze moved through the square, rustling the flags that marked the entrance to the historic stables. Tourists had already begun arriving early, their excitement buzzing in the air. Today was special. The guards would practice a full ceremonial drill, and everyone knew that each horse and rider had to perform with precision. Among all the horses, Valor, the new chestnut recruit, stood out quietly in his stall, his ears twitching at every sound, alert but calm compared to yesterday. Thomas, his young guard, arrived before the others, carrying a calm determination. He had spent hours the previous day observing Valor's reactions and learning his little quirks. He knew the chestnut horse was intelligent, cautious, and very sensitive to any sudden movements. Today, Thomas planned to try something different. Instead of coaxing Valor into the box as before, He would let the horse make decisions at his own pace, encouraging trust rather than pushing him. The stable was already lively with activity. Senior guards were grooming the older horses, brushing their glossy coats until they shone in the morning sun. Saddles and bridles gleamed on the racks, and the soft sounds of hooves moving across the stable floors filled the air. Valor watched everything carefully, shifting his weight from one hoof to the other, his head high, ears alert, and nostrils flaring slightly at every new sound. Thomas approached quietly, a piece of soft cloth in hand, the same one he had used yesterday. He extended it toward Valor and allowed the horse to sniff and touch it freely. Valor hesitated for a moment but then gently nuzzled it, curiosity overcoming caution. While Thomas worked patiently, other guards whispered among themselves. Some thought Valor's hesitation might slow down the practice, but others recognized that patience was the key. The senior sergeant, Harris, leaned against a post, observing silently. He had seen hundreds of horses come through the stables, and he knew that forcing a new horse never worked. Valor was intelligent enough to understand commands, but trust had to come first. After a few minutes, Valor took a small, careful step into the box, then paused and looked back at Thomas as if checking for approval. Thomas smiled quietly, crouching slightly to meet the horse's gaze. "Good boy," he murmured. "You're doing exactly what I want." No rush. The calm tone, the lack of pressure, seemed to relax Valor. Slowly, he stepped fully into the box, planting all four hooves inside and standing still for the first time without any sign of resistance. Encouraged by this progress, Thomas decided it was time to introduce another element: the rider. Captain Lawson, an experienced officer, stepped forward to assist. He had been observing Valor from the moment he arrived, intrigued by the horse's cautious behavior. "Let's see how he handles a rider," the captain said quietly. Thomas led Valor out of the box for a brief walk around the stable yard. Valor's movements were careful, deliberate, but he was calm. He followed Thomas and Captain Lawson without hesitation, showing that yesterday's small steps of trust had begun to pay off. Once back in the box, Thomas gently helped Valor lift his hooves so the captain could fit the ceremonial saddle. Valor remained surprisingly still, his eyes scanning the room but showing no signs of panic. The other guards glanced over, impressed. It was clear that Valor was beginning to understand that the stable was a safe place, that the humans around him were not threatening. His cautious nature was slowly transforming into confidence. Outside, tourists were beginning to gather in larger numbers. They could hear the soft sounds of training, the occasional nickering of horses, and the steady rhythm of hooves. Some pressed cameras to the stable windows, curious about the new horse that seemed different from the others. Thomas ignored the crowd, focusing on Valor, knowing that any distraction could undo the progress they had made. He whispered softly, running his hands along the horse's neck, ensuring that Valor remained relaxed. The real test came when Thomas led Valor out of the stable yard and onto the parade ground. The open space was much larger than the confined boxes, and the sounds of other horses practicing echoed through the square. Valor's ears twitched nervously, and he took a few hesitant steps before stopping. Thomas gave him a reassuring pat, speaking in a calm, steady voice. "Easy, Valor, just follow me. Take your time." The horse seemed to sense the gentle encouragement, and slowly he began to walk forward, each step deliberate, careful, but confident. Other guards started forming lines for the morning drill, their horses already standing tall and steady. Valor's movement drew attention, both from his fellow horses and from the onlooking tourists. The chestnut horse's intelligence was clear. He observed the other horses, mimicked their calm posture, and adjusted his steps accordingly. Thomas smiled quietly to himself. The progress they had made yesterday and this morning was paying off. Valor was not just learning commands. He was learning to trust, to understand the rhythm and discipline of ceremonial life. As they approached the starting point for the drill, Valor hesitated once more. The open parade ground, the echoes of hooves, the flags fluttering in the wind, it was all new and overwhelming. Thomas stopped beside him, crouched slightly, and spoke softly. "You've got this, Valor. Just one step at a time." Slowly, Valor lifted his hooves and stepped forward, joining the other horses in the line. The tourists outside clapped quietly, impressed by the calmness and composure of the new horse. Captain Lawson gave Thomas a nod of approval. "He's ready," he whispered. Thomas could feel a mix of relief and pride. Valor had taken the first major step in proving that he could handle the ceremonial duties. It wasn't perfect. There were still signs of caution in the horse's eyes, but it was enough to move forward. The drill began. Horses marched in formation, their hooves hitting the cobblestones with precise rhythm, creating the familiar clatter that London tourists love to watch. Valor followed Thomas's guidance carefully, keeping pace with the others. Every step was a lesson in patience and discipline, every movement a test of his confidence. Occasionally, he glanced around at the other horses, mimicking their calm stance, and Thomas could see his confidence growing with each passing minute. During a brief pause in the drill, Thomas led Valor back toward the stable for a short rest. The chestnut horse's muscles moved smoothly, showing that he was adapting to the ceremonial demands. Thomas removed the saddle and allowed Valor to relax, rubbing his neck and speaking softly. Valor nuzzled Thomas gently, a small gesture that showed trust and understanding. The young guard smiled. It was moments like these that made all the patience and effort worthwhile. Meanwhile, the other guards observed quietly. Some nodded in approval, others whispered to each other about the progress of the new recruit. Sergeant Harris, standing a few steps away, gave a small smile. "That's the way," he said. "Patience, respect, and calm, those are the keys. He's going to be an excellent ceremonial horse if you keep it up." Thomas nodded, grateful for the guidance, but he knew the real test was still ahead. Valor had made great progress, but the full ceremonial performance would be far more demanding than these first drills. As the morning went on, Thomas continued to work with Valor, gradually increasing the complexity of the exercises. They practiced stepping in rhythm, maintaining formation, and responding to commands. Each small success was celebrated quietly, a nod, a soft pat, a whispered "good boy." The chestnut horse was learning not just the physical routines but the mental discipline required to be a King's Guard horse. By midday, Valor had completed several full circuits of the parade ground with minimal hesitation. The young guard felt a swell of pride. He knew the journey was far from over, but these first achievements were crucial. Valor had begun to understand his role, the expectations, and most importantly, that he could trust the humans guiding him. The story of Valor's first full day on the parade ground would become one of the quiet victories remembered by the guards. No dramatic incidents had occurred, no loud displays of fear or stubbornness, only small steps taken with patience, understanding, and trust. It was a day of learning, bonding, and preparation, a foundation for the ceremonial excellence that the Horse Guards parade demanded. By the time the afternoon sun began to cast long shadows across the square, Valor was resting calmly in his stall. Thomas gently brushed his coat, checking for any signs of fatigue. The chestnut horse lowered his head, relaxed in a way that suggested he had begun to accept this new world as familiar. Thomas whispered softly, "Tomorrow we'll do even more, but for today you did wonderfully." As the tourists left, the clatter of hooves faded and the stables quieted. A sense of accomplishment filled the air. Valor, the new recruit, had faced his fears and begun the journey to becoming a ceremonial horse of the King's Guard. And for Thomas, the young guard, it was a reminder that patience, calmness, and understanding could turn even the most nervous horse into a trusted partner. The following morning brought a crisp chill to London's streets, with a soft fog hanging low over the Horse Guards parade. Tourists were already gathering, their cameras clicking, eager to see the famous king's guard horses and their riders in action. Inside the stables, Valor, the chestnut recruit, stood quietly in his box, his coat gleaming in the soft light. After 2 days of careful guidance from Thomas, Valor had begun to understand the routine, but today promised to be different. Today, he would face his first real test, a larger, more challenging drill that required him to march in formation with the other horses for an extended period. Thomas arrived early, as always, his mind focused on preparing Valor for the exercise ahead. He had spent the previous day observing the horse closely, noting every small behavior, every twitch of the ears or flick of the tail. Valor was intelligent, cautious, and sensitive, qualities that could make him an excellent ceremonial horse if handled with care. Thomas whispered softly as he approached the box, speaking to Valor with the calm, patient voice that had begun to earn the horse's trust. "Good morning, boy. Today we have a big day ahead. I know you can do it." Valor's ears flicked forward slightly, and he nuzzled Thomas's hand, a small but encouraging sign of readiness. The stables were alive with activity. Senior guards brushed and polished the other horses, checking bridles, saddles, and stirrups with meticulous attention. The sounds of hooves on the stable floor, metal clinking, and soft nickers filled the air. Valor observed everything carefully, shifting his weight as he watched the movements around him. Unlike yesterday when he had been hesitant, today he seemed more alert, aware of his surroundings but still cautious. Thomas knew that caution was not a bad thing. It meant the horse was thinking, analyzing, and learning. Thomas led Valor out of the box and into the open yard, allowing him to stretch his legs. The morning fog made the parade ground seem even larger, the outlines of flags and statues slightly blurred in the soft light. Other guards were already forming lines, preparing for the extended drill. Horses shifted their weight, stamping gently, ears flicking, while their riders adjusted reins and saddles. Valor watched the formation carefully, occasionally taking a small step forward or backward, testing the ground beneath his hooves. Captain Lawson approached Thomas quietly. "This drill is more demanding than the previous ones," he said. "It will test Valor's confidence, patience, and focus. But I believe he is ready if you stay calm and steady." Thomas nodded, feeling a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. He knew that ceremonial horses were trained to handle all kinds of distractions, from the clatter of hooves to sudden noises from the crowd. Today would be Valor's first real exposure to such a situation. The drill began. Horses marched in precise lines, their hooves striking the cobblestones in a rhythmic pattern. Valor followed Thomas closely, moving carefully to match the other horse's pace. At first, he did well, lifting his hooves with deliberate precision, keeping his head high and maintaining a steady rhythm. Thomas felt a sense of pride but knew better than to relax. The real challenge often came unexpectedly, and Valor's instincts were still finely tuned to fear and caution. It came sooner than Thomas expected. A group of tourists, excited by the spectacle, suddenly moved closer to the barriers, snapping photos loudly. One tourist's camera clicked repeatedly, the flash startling Valor. The chestnut horse froze, ears pinned back, eyes wide. For a moment, it seemed as if he might bolt or refuse to move. Thomas remained calm, his hand gently resting on Valor's neck. He spoke softly, repeating the words he had used since the first day. "Easy, Valor. Stay with me. You're safe." The horse trembled slightly but did not run, a small victory in itself. Other guards noticed Valor's hesitation but did not intervene. They had been through this countless times with new recruits. Horses needed to learn to face distractions and regain composure on their own, guided quietly by the rider. Thomas led Valor in a slow, steady circle, allowing him to absorb the noise without forcing him to act. Gradually, Valor's muscles relaxed, and he lifted his hooves again, rejoining the formation with careful steps. The crowd outside continued to murmur, some pointing at the young horse's cautious movements, others taking photographs. Valor's calm return to the drill impressed the senior officers quietly. Though none spoke aloud, discipline demanded that attention remain on the drill itself. The next challenge came from a different direction. A large flag held by a senior officer for the drill suddenly shifted in the wind, fluttering loudly. Valor's ears twitched, and he took a hesitant step back. Thomas noticed immediately and adjusted his position, moving beside Valor and speaking in the same calm, gentle tone. He allowed the horse to observe the flag, to understand that it was not a threat. Slowly, Valor raised his head, lowered his tail, and stepped forward again. Thomas could feel the tension in the horse's muscles ease, a clear sign that Valor was learning to control his fear. The drill continued for over an hour, each movement more demanding than the last. Horses were required to turn in precise formations, halt suddenly, and march again without losing rhythm. Valor followed Thomas's guidance, sometimes needing a few extra seconds to respond, but gradually improving with each repetition. His confidence was growing, small step by small step. The senior guards began to whisper quietly among themselves, noting the chestnut horse's progress. It was not perfect, but it was enough to show that Valor had the potential to become a reliable ceremonial horse. Halfway through the drill, a new test arose unexpectedly. A carriage carrying dignitaries arrived at the edge of the parade ground, horses clattering loudly as they pulled it. Valor froze, nostrils flaring, eyes wide. Thomas remained beside him, calm and steady, speaking softly. He allowed Valor to watch the carriage approach, to hear the sounds without panic. Slowly, Valor lowered his head, exhaled through his nostrils, and resumed walking. The other horses continued the drill around him, undisturbed by the noise. Valor had learned to observe, judge, and then act calmly, a critical skill for any ceremonial horse. By midday, Valor was exhausted but still performing well. Thomas led him back to the stables, removing the saddle and patting him gently. The chestnut horse nuzzled Thomas's hand, a small gesture of trust and gratitude. "You did well today," Thomas whispered. "I'm proud of you." Valor blinked slowly, lowering his head in relaxation. The young guard knew that this day had tested not just Valor's physical abilities, but also his courage and patience. He had faced noises, distractions, and new experiences, all without panic, guided by trust in his rider. The senior officers, observing from a distance, were quietly impressed. Captain Lawson approached Thomas as Valor rested. "You've done an excellent job," he said. "He's proving himself to be intelligent, adaptable, and brave." That kind of temperament is rare and valuable in a ceremonial horse. Thomas nodded, knowing that the journey was far from over but feeling a sense of pride in the progress they had made together. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, the stables returned to their usual rhythm. Horses grazed quietly in their boxes, nickering softly, while guards polished tack and prepared for the next drill. Valor stood calmly, his chestnut coat shining, his muscles relaxed but alert. Thomas continued to brush him gently, rewarding him for his focus and composure throughout the morning. It was a quiet, satisfying moment, a reminder that even small victories in training could feel like great achievements when earned with patience and care. That evening, as the stables grew quiet and the tourists dispersed, Valor rested in his box, ears flicking occasionally at distant noises. Thomas stayed nearby, reviewing the events of the day in his mind. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, larger drills, more complex formations, and potentially more distractions. But he also knew that Valor was ready to face them. The bond between horse and rider had strengthened, built on trust, patience, and careful guidance. The story of Valor's third day in training would become one of quiet triumph. No dramatic accidents had occurred, but the challenges he faced, startling noises, sudden movements, and distractions were real tests of his courage and composure. By handling them calmly and gradually, he had proven that he could become a true ceremonial horse of the king's guard, capable of performing under pressure while maintaining grace and discipline. As Thomas left the stables that evening, he cast one last glance at Valor. The horse was calm, confident, and alert, ready for whatever the next day might bring. It was a moment of quiet pride, a recognition that trust and patience could overcome fear, and that a partnership built on understanding could achieve great things. Valor's journey was just beginning, but each day, each challenge, was shaping him into a remarkable horse, capable of standing proudly alongside the finest ceremonial mounts in London. The morning of the fourth day dawned with a bright, crisp air over the Horse Guards parade. The sunlight glinted off the polished metal of the ceremonial saddles and bridles, and the flags fluttered gently in the wind. Tourists had already gathered in anticipation, their chatter and camera clicks filling the square. Today was different for Valor, the chestnut recruit. It was the day of the biggest challenge he had faced so far. The full ceremonial rehearsal with all the guards, their horses, and the complicated formations required for an official ceremony. This would not be a simple drill. It would test Valor's trust, focus, and composure like never before. Thomas arrived early at the stables, as he always did, to prepare Valor for the day ahead. He had been closely observing the horse over the past 3 days, noting every reaction, every twitch of the ears, and every hesitant step. Valor had grown more confident with each passing day, but Thomas knew that today could push the young horse beyond his comfort zone. The parade ground would be larger, the formations more complex, and there would be more distractions. Thomas approached Valor's box, speaking in his usual calm and gentle voice. "Good morning, Valor. Today is a big day, but I know you can do it. Just stay with me and everything will be fine." Valor lifted his head and nuzzled Thomas's hand, a gesture that showed both trust and readiness. The stables were bustling with activity. Senior guards polished the horses' coats, checking every bridle, stirrup, and saddle. The soft clatter of hooves against the stable floor, the jingling of metal, and the quiet nickering of horses created a lively symphony. Valor observed all of it carefully, shifting his weight occasionally but remaining calm. He had learned the basics of trust, but he had yet to face the chaos of a full ceremonial rehearsal. Thomas led him out into the yard, giving him a chance to stretch and adjust before the drill began. As they moved toward the parade ground, Valor's ears twitched at the unfamiliar sounds, the distant clatter of another carriage, the shouts of tourists, and the echo of hooves from other horses. For a moment he froze, hesitant to move forward. Thomas stayed close, placing a reassuring hand on the horse's neck. "Easy, Valor. You can do this, just one step at a time." Slowly, Valor stepped forward, carefully joining the line of horses that were beginning to form. The other guards noticed the chestnut horse's cautious movements but did not comment. They understood that today would be his true test. The rehearsal began. Horses moved in precise formations, their hooves striking the cobblestones in perfect rhythm. The air was filled with the familiar sound of marching, the soft commands of officers, and the occasional whistle guiding the formation. Valor followed Thomas closely, moving with careful precision. At first he matched the other horses perfectly, his head held high, his steps steady. Thomas could feel the horse's muscles tense slightly with each new movement, a sign that Valor was concentrating and learning. Then, the first real challenge arrived. A group of tourists, unaware of the ceremonial protocol, moved too close to the barriers, some waving their hands and clicking cameras repeatedly. Valor froze, his ears pinned back, nostrils flaring. The sudden noise startled him, and for a moment Thomas feared the worst. But he remained calm, placing a steadying hand on Valor's neck and speaking softly. "It's all right, Valor. Stay with me. You're safe." Slowly, the horse relaxed, lifting his hooves again and resuming the formation. It was a small victory, but an important one, showing that Valor was beginning to manage distractions without panic. The drill continued, each formation more complex than the last. Horses were required to halt suddenly, turn sharply, and march in precise lines without breaking rhythm. Valor followed Thomas's guidance carefully, sometimes taking a few extra moments to adjust, but never losing focus completely. The senior officers observed silently, impressed by the horse's intelligence and adaptability. Captain Lawson leaned toward Thomas and whispered, "He's handling this better than most new recruits. Keep him steady and he'll do well." Thomas nodded, grateful for the encouragement but focused entirely on maintaining Valor's calm and composure. Midway through the rehearsal, a sudden challenge emerged. A large ceremonial flag, held by an officer as part of the drill, snapped sharply in the wind. The movement startled Valor and he froze in place, ears pinned back. Other horses nearby shifted nervously, sensing his tension. Thomas immediately moved closer, speaking in a calm, steady voice. He allowed Valor to observe the flag, to see that it was not a threat. Slowly, the chestnut horse relaxed his muscles, lifted his head, and continued moving. It was a moment that could have caused chaos, but Valor's growing trust in Thomas allowed him to recover quickly. Then came the unexpected. A carriage carrying dignitaries approached the parade ground, its horses clattering loudly against the cobblestones. Valor's ears twitched, and his eyes widened. The unfamiliar noise and movement tested his nerves like never before. Thomas stayed close, speaking softly and gently guiding him through each step. Valor watched the carriage carefully, assessing it before stepping forward again. His movements were deliberate but steady, showing a remarkable level of composure for a horse so new to the ceremonial environment. As the drill progressed, the challenges continued. The combination of new noises, sudden movements, and the need to maintain perfect formation required both physical and mental strength. Valor responded well under pressure, following Thomas's guidance and gradually learning to trust his own instincts. Each successful step boosted his confidence, and Thomas noticed the change. Valor's hesitation was giving way to calm focus, and the young guard felt a swell of pride in the horse's progress. However, the biggest test was yet to come. Toward the end of the rehearsal, the guards were required to perform a complex maneuver, a coordinated halt, turn, and march in formation while maintaining eye contact with the crowd. This maneuver demanded precision and confidence, and it would be Valor's ultimate test. Thomas positioned himself beside the chestnut horse, whispering encouragement. "You've got this, Valor, just follow my lead." Valor responded by stepping forward slowly, his ears alert but calm, his muscles ready for the challenge. The maneuver began. Horses halted and turned in unison, their movements precise and synchronized. Valor followed Thomas closely, carefully mimicking the other horse's actions. At first, his movements were slightly hesitant, but with each step, he grew more confident. The crowd outside watched in awe, impressed by the perfect rhythm and grace of the ceremonial horses. Valor, once nervous and unsure, now moved with focus and poise, responding to the guidance and trust that had been built over the past days. As the rehearsal came to an end, Thomas led Valor back to the stables. The horse's coat glistened with sweat, a testament to the effort and concentration required throughout the morning. Thomas gently removed the saddle, rubbing Valor's neck and whispering words of praise. Valor nuzzled Thomas's hand, a small gesture of gratitude and trust. The young guard knew that today had been a turning point. Valor had faced his fears, confronted challenges, and demonstrated the courage and discipline necessary to become a true ceremonial horse. Senior officers observed quietly from a distance, impressed by the chestnut recruit's progress. Captain Lawson approached Thomas, smiling. "He's proven himself today," he said. "He's intelligent, adaptable, and brave." That kind of temperament is rare and valuable in a ceremonial horse. Thomas nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride. The day had been challenging, but Valor had risen to meet every obstacle, showing that trust, patience, and guidance could achieve remarkable results. By evening, the stables had returned to their usual calm rhythm. Horses nickered softly in their boxes, guards cleaned and polished tack, and the sounds of hooves on the floor became gentle echoes. Valor rested quietly in his stall, ears flicking occasionally at distant noises, but otherwise calm and relaxed. Thomas continued to brush him gently, reinforcing the bond of trust that had been strengthened over the past 4 days. Each stroke of the brush, each whispered word, was a reminder that patience, understanding, and gentle guidance were the foundation of their partnership. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the parade ground, Thomas took a moment to reflect on the progress Valor had made. The chestnut horse, once nervous and hesitant, had faced distractions, startling noises, and complex formations with growing confidence. Today had been a turning point, a day that tested his courage, discipline, and trust in his rider. Thomas knew that the road ahead would bring more challenges, but he also knew that Valor was ready to face them, step by step, with patience and guidance. The fourth day ended with a quiet sense of accomplishment. Valor had proven that he could overcome fear, trust his rider, and perform under pressure. The young chestnut horse had faced his biggest challenge yet and had emerged stronger, calmer, and more confident. For Thomas, it was a moment of pride and satisfaction, a reminder that trust, patience, and careful guidance could transform even the most nervous recruit into a reliable and remarkable ceremonial horse. The fifth day at the Horse Guards parade began with a soft, golden light, filtering over the stables and the parade ground. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the faint scent of hay, leather, and polished cobblestones. Today was not just another practice. It was the day Valor would take part in his first full ceremonial performance, alongside the most experienced horses and riders of the King's Guard. The pressure was higher than ever, but Valor, the chestnut recruit, had spent the past 4 days learning, growing, and gaining confidence. Thomas arrived early, as always, his heart full of anticipation and quiet determination. Over the past days, he had guided Valor through a journey of trust, patience, and discipline. The young horse had faced fears, startling noises, sudden movements, and the challenges of learning precise ceremonial maneuvers. Each day had built upon the last, teaching Valor to trust his rider, himself, and the routines of the Horse Guards. Today would be the culmination of that effort, the moment when all of their work would be put to the test in front of a larger audience. Valor stood quietly in his stall, his coat shining in the morning light. His muscles were strong and alert, and his eyes were bright, showing focus and curiosity rather than fear. Thomas approached slowly, speaking in the calm, gentle voice that Valor had come to trust. "Good morning, Valor," he whispered. "Today is your day. You've worked hard and I know you can do this. Just stay with me step by step." Valor responded with a small nuzzle, a silent acknowledgement of trust and readiness. The stables were buzzing with activity. Senior guards polished saddles, bridles, and stirrups until they gleamed. Other horses nickering softly, moving from one foot to another, while guards adjusted their boots, hats, and uniforms. The sounds of hooves clattering on the cobblestones outside the stable doors mixed with the distant chatter of tourists gathering for the ceremonial event. Valor observed everything carefully, his ears flicking forward as he processed the new and familiar sights and sounds. Thomas led Valor out into the stable yard for a brief warm-up. The chestnut horse moved smoothly, stretching his legs and adjusting to the larger space. Other horses followed their riders in preparation, forming neat lines as they awaited the start of the ceremony. Valor's steps were confident, deliberate, and calm, a far cry from the nervous, hesitant movements of his first day. Thomas felt a swell of pride, knowing that all the patient work had built a strong foundation for this day. As the ceremonial rehearsal began, the parade ground filled with the rhythmic sound of hooves striking cobblestones. Horses moved in perfect formation, lifting their legs with synchronized precision. Officers shouted commands clearly, guiding the movements, while Valor followed Thomas closely, responding to each subtle signal. The chestnut horse's muscles were tense but controlled, his head high, ears alert and eyes scanning carefully for instructions. The first challenge came quickly. Tourists pressed close to the barriers, waving hands and snapping photos enthusiastically. Valor's ears twitched, and he paused slightly, a momentary flicker of hesitation crossing his face. Thomas stayed calm, speaking softly and resting a hand gently on Valor's neck. "It's okay, Valor, just follow me." Slowly, the chestnut horse relaxed, lifted his hooves, and stepped forward, rejoining the formation with careful precision. The other guards noticed the smooth recovery, impressed by the young horse's composure under pressure. The ceremonial movements became more complex. Horses were required to halt suddenly, turn sharply, and maintain perfect alignment while remaining aware of the crowd. Valor responded steadily, learning to adjust his movements based on Thomas's guidance. Each successful step built confidence, not just in his abilities but in the bond he shared with his rider. Thomas knew that trust was the key. Valor had learned to trust him, and through that trust he could perform even under the most challenging circumstances. Halfway through the ceremony, an unexpected test arose. A sudden gust of wind made the large ceremonial flags flutter violently. Horses nearby reacted with minor signs of alarm, ears flicking back and tails swishing. Valor froze for a split second, but Thomas remained calm, gently patting his neck and speaking softly. "It's all right, Valor, nothing to fear." The chestnut horse observed carefully, assessed the situation, and then moved forward again, staying perfectly in line with the other horses. His reaction was cautious but controlled, demonstrating the growth he had achieved over the past 4 days. Then came another surprise. A carriage carrying officials entered the square, the clatter of wheels and horses echoing loudly across the parade ground. Valor's ears flicked nervously, his body tensing briefly. Thomas stayed beside him, maintaining a steady presence, and guided him slowly forward. Valor watched the carriage carefully, lifted his head, and continued marching, step by step, without panic. The chestnut horse's ability to remain calm under these conditions impressed even the senior guards quietly observing from a distance. The drill continued, demanding perfect timing, rhythm, and precision. Horses performed intricate formations, turning and halting in unison, while officers issued clear commands. Valor's movements were steady and deliberate, showing a remarkable understanding of the ceremony's requirements. He had learned not only the physical maneuvers, but also the mental discipline necessary to remain focused despite distractions, noises, and unexpected challenges. Each step he took reinforced the trust between horse and rider, a silent partnership built on patience, care, and guidance. As the final movements approached, the horses were required to perform a coordinated halt and salute while remaining in perfect formation. Valor followed Thomas closely, his body tense but controlled, his head high and his eyes alert. The other horses moved smoothly around him, maintaining alignment and rhythm. Valor mirrored their calm, precise movements, completing the final steps without hesitation. The crowd outside watched in awe, impressed by the elegance, precision, and discipline of the ceremonial horses. Valor, once nervous and hesitant, had become a calm and confident performer. When the rehearsal ended, Thomas led Valor back to the stables. The chestnut horse's muscles were warm and slightly sweaty from the exertion, but his posture remained proud and controlled. Thomas gently removed the saddle and ran his hands along Valor's neck, whispering words of praise. "You did wonderfully today, Valor." "I'm proud of you," Valor responded with a soft nuzzle, a quiet expression of trust and gratitude. The young guard smiled, knowing that their journey together had reached a significant milestone. Senior officers, including Captain Lawson and Sergeant Harris, quietly observed the horse and rider. Captain Lawson approached Thomas with a nod of approval. "He has shown remarkable progress," he said. From the nervous young horse of his first day to this calm and disciplined performer, Valor has proven himself. "Your patience and guidance have made all the difference." Thomas felt a sense of pride and satisfaction, recognizing that the success was shared equally between horse and rider. As the afternoon sun began to set, casting long shadows across the parade ground, the stables grew quiet. Horses grazed or rested in their boxes, while guards polished tack and completed their routine chores. Valor rested calmly, ears flicking occasionally at distant sounds but otherwise relaxed. Thomas continued to brush him, reinforcing their bond and rewarding him for the efforts of the day. Each stroke of the brush and gentle word of encouragement reminded the horse that trust, patience, and understanding were at the heart of their partnership. That evening, as the square emptied and the crowds dispersed, Thomas reflected on the journey Valor had taken in just 5 days. The young chestnut horse, once hesitant and fearful, had faced distractions, startling noises, sudden movements, and complex formations. Each challenge had been met with patience, guidance, and careful encouragement, transforming Valor into a calm, confident, and disciplined ceremonial horse. The trust between horse and rider had grown stronger with every step, creating a partnership capable of performing under pressure with grace and composure. Valor's journey, though just beginning, had reached an important milestone. He had learned to trust, to respond calmly under pressure, and to navigate the ceremonial routines of the King's Guard. Thomas knew that future drills and official ceremonies would present new challenges, but he also knew that the foundation they had built together would carry them through. Each day, each small victory, had shaped Valor into a horse capable of standing proudly among the finest ceremonial mounts in London. As night fell, the stables became quiet and peaceful. Valor rested in his box, his chestnut coat reflecting the last rays of sunlight. Thomas lingered nearby, watching the young horse with pride. They had faced fears, learned new routines, and built a bond of trust that would last throughout Valor's service in the King's Guard. It was a moment of quiet triumph, a reminder that patience, care, and understanding could transform challenges into success. The 5th day ended not with loud applause or fanfare, but with a quiet sense of accomplishment. Valor had proven himself capable, courageous, and disciplined. He had completed his first full ceremonial performance, earning the respect of his fellow horses, the guards, and the senior officers. For Thomas, the young guard, it was a deeply rewarding experience, a reminder that the true strength of a partnership lay in trust, patience, and mutual respect.